Hello everyone and welcome back. So today we're talking about the Tina documentary on HBO, and all I have to say is that was epic. I enjoyed myself. I was hooked right away. I didn't know if I wanted to review this, and then I watched it a second time and I was like, yeah, I have a lot to say. Yeah, I'm gonna review it. And so here we go. So I think the goal of this documentary was to get people to revisit Tina Turner's work under a new frame of mind, and they do this by recounting her relationship with Ike. Not to solidify it, but to kind of illustrate it as a footnote and not as this like hallmark that people try to make it out time and time again. And like everyone else, like I'm familiar with the music. I've never done like a deep dive. Like I don't know too much about Tina Turner on like this level. And of course I've watched What's Love Got to Do with It, like everyone else. And so after watching this, I was impressed by her life experiences. I mean, Ike Turner was such a footnote. Like there's so many other things and so many other experiences that she's had that really kind of inspire you to look back and kind of revisit her work in a different way. And also the lessons that she's able to take, because she's partly narrating this documentary. And not only the lessons, kind of good or bad, but how she kind of used each of these experiences, however horrific, to keep moving and not kind of be paralyzed and stuck in time. So the documentary is divided into a few parts, and in part one we talk about like who is Tina Turner, how did she get this name, and what shaped this individual. And I enjoyed this first part of the documentary because she talks about like her self-image and what formed her self-image and kind of how she saw herself. She's kind of in this dead-end church town. She felt misunderstood. She never really felt good enough. And so she would read a lot of these magazines like Vogue or watch these Hollywood movies and see these people that were so beautiful and so, interesting. And it's funny, like now that we know what went on in old Hollywood, like, they were not happy or, any of these things. But when you're young and this is kind of like the entertainment that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, it's inspiring. And so this kind of shaped her self-image, but also her potential in terms of how high she thought she could go. Right? Like she knew she wanted more for herself, but she didn't know what more was. It's not like, I'm going to go and be a superstar too. It was more like, it would be really nice to get paid to do what I love. And she, the way she talked about it, I didn't have the best clothes. I wasn't the prettiest. I wasn't this and that. And I think everyone's been there where you compare yourself and nobody likes where they start off, right? But there's always an end goal. And so she's talking about her self-image and, her life and how she saw herself. And then we get into the bulk of this documentary, which is Ike and her relationship to Ike Turner, the aftermath, not just for herself, but for her legacy and career as a whole. So Ike, long story short, was a very, very talented, insecure man who had a deep mistrust for the people around him. And he had a horrible time in the music industry. People were ripping him off. He'd been in it for a long time. He kind of orchestrated all these songs and brought all these people together, but they would always leave him, right? His fear was that people were always leaving him. They'd kind of use him for his talent, and then once they got what they wanted, they would run off with the money and leave him stranded back at square one. And it was always starting over, he felt like. And then he met Tina. And the contrast between how Tina saw him and how he saw her is just like night and day. Right, so Tina is a young, impressionable musician. She looked at him and she saw his talent, right? She respected him. She thought he was the most talented, most intelligent person in the world. And she was really sad for him, right? She didn't want to be just another person to use him for his talent and run away. So she was very loyal. She said a promise is a promise. Like, I was not going to leave this man and make him feel like everybody else. And not only that, I'm going to make sure that everybody sees how talented this man is. Like, I'm going to get everybody to see what I see. And on the flip side, what he saw was a paycheck, right? He just exploited her naivete. She really thought this was somebody who was going to take care of her and make sure everything was okay. But that's just not the case, right? He took her money and he ran. Again, he gives her her name. He kind of really gets her started on this road to fame. And so we get into her family life. So we get into her family life growing up and her family life with Ike. And growing up, it was rough. Her mother and father both abandoned her, and she described her mother in a way that was quite eerie. Like, she would watch her all the time. She thought she was like the most beautiful person on the planet, until one day she just got up and left. And despite reconciling with her, despite kind of buying her a house, taking care of her, because you know, you can hate your father, but you cannot hate your mother. And this is something that people don't talk about. And this is a whole other video for me. Like, I got mother issues as well. And the way she talked about her mother, like, she never got the love reciprocated back. She never felt that there was any justification that she could give her mother that would kind of excuse her behavior, because the more she did, the more it just kind of highlighted the fact that this woman just hated her. And the one thing that kind of struck me and hurt me was that she said, you know, her mother, although she thought she was talented, she never believed that she could make it on her own. Like, even buying her a house, taking care of her, she said, who's really doing this? This isn't you. Like, you're not smart enough. You're not good enough to do this. Like, they're like, who's the brains behind the operation? And Tina's like, I'm the brains. Like, and the fact that you don't even believe in me and you continuously try and take things away from me, it's not really something that she ever got over or was able to kind of reconcile. And this kind of leaked into her life with Ike. And the eeriest thing in this documentary was the fact that her son, Craig, who had committed suicide, was like narrating the abuse that he saw. And he was saying that he hated his father. And watching his mother, like, she was somebody who made everybody feel comfortable. Again, she was like, when you're that person who makes everybody happy and, you know, you want to make everybody feel comfortable and safe, but people aren't reciprocating that back to you, it's devastating. And so he was watching his father just be the sadist towards his mother, and his mother just kind of accommodating every single time and adjusting. And no matter how hard she adjusted, it just got worse. Like, like the abuse just got progressively worse until they kind of hit a rock bottom and she left. She got up and she left. She said, I don't want this anymore. And I like how they correlated her leaving with her increasing confidence on stage, because Ike seemed to be like a one-trick pony. You know, he just seemed like, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So she had other dreams. She wanted to be a rock star. She wanted to grow out of this phase, like, okay, we did the bops, we need to move on. And so the more confident she got on stage and the more she felt confident in her work, the more she saw that, you know, Ike isn't this all-knowing, all-knowing being. And so she got up and left, and that was a terrifying night, the way she described it. And, you know, the only thing she left out of that relationship was her name. Again, he gave her the name, but she breathed life into it. And that closed that chapter, you know. So she just walked out. She never wanted to see this man again. And then we get to my favorite part of the documentary, which is like life post Ike Turner. And this was like the hustle phase. And a lot of people don't know this about Tina. I didn't know this. Like, she was hustling, she was working. She had nothing to her name. She had to work, right? She had to support her kids. He took the money, he took the everything, the records. Like, she doesn't own any of it. And so she had to start over, but her willingness to start over, like, she didn't beat herself up. Like, she took every gig and she made the best of it. And there's a lesson to be learned here, right? Like, again, nobody likes where they start, but you have to give 100% into everything you do. And if you're doing 100% each time, like, something good will happen. But if you're kind of going into things like, you know, I can't wait to get to the stadium and this is not good enough, like, you're never gonna get there. Like, it doesn't matter if you're at a stadium or in some weird cabaret bar, like, you should be able to make a popping, like, every single time. And so the relief, I think, in terms of being able to go on stage without having this gun, you know, or being under duress, was relaxing. So she could finally just get paid to do what she loves. You know, of course, it wasn't the most ideal situation, but she gave 110%. And the advantage of working with someone like Ike is that, you know, they had to do their own makeup, they had to do their own dances, they had to organize everything. And so she learned to kind of roll with what's given, right? Like, you don't get to pick and choose, or, you know, like, he would improvise songs, she would have to just react on site. So in a way, it was like training for this. So she was able to take a situation, kind of read the audience, and just adjust as need be, sing the songs however she wanted, kind of, you know, decide what set she wants to do, how she wants to perform it. And so this gave her a lot of experience, right? Like, she was able to experiment, figure out what worked, what didn't. And this time period is really crucial, because when she does become successful, you know, people are like, oh my God, like, you're so good. And she's like, I've always been good. Y'all just noticed that I'm good, but I was always good. And so her manager sees her perform and he's just kind of in shock, right? He's like, if you could make this shitty club pop, like, yeah, I believe in you. You can definitely sell out a stadium, right? And so she had this dream to be a rock star. She didn't know how she was going to get there. But one thing was for sure, nobody on the planet thought that she could do it. And they have this whole commentary on like age. And I think a lot of people, or many people, kind of pin accomplishments on age. Like you have to reach a certain milestone by a certain time in life. And what I've come to recognize and learn is that that's just not healthy and it's not possible, right? And I think this documentary articulated that nicely. Like if you pin all your hopes and dreams and say, by this age, I'm gonna do this, you will play yourself. You will be disappointed. Instead, what I've come to learn is that you have to kind of give yourself a feeling or experience and say, I want to have these lessons or these experiences by this time period. And once I'm done, I'm ready to move on. Because the alternative is you pin all these accomplishments on age and you undermine yourself, you feel stupid, you're like, I'm not this, I'm not that, I don't, yeah. And so once you actually get to that point, you're disappointed, right? Like you accomplished it, but you're like, I did it by 40, like I'm a failure. You're not a failure. It's just, this is not a way to think. So Tina never, like, her age didn't bother her. Manager is trying to figure out, like, what am I gonna do with you? You're too old. I don't know what to do with you. And she's like, that's your problem. Like, I'm gonna keep doing me. I'm gonna keep performing. If you can figure it out, you figure it out. But if not, you know, it is what it is. I'm not gonna stress myself out over it. And it's this belief that I think inspired everybody else, because if you've ever talked to people that you're like, you're crazy, you know what I mean? Like the way they talk about things, you're like, that's not possible. But because they talk about it in such a way, like you feel like it's possible, you're like, you know what, actually, maybe you're right. Maybe we can do this. And so the way she described it, you know, she's just like, you know what, I would just play with an idea, you know, think of a thought and think like, what could happen if I do it? And you need that limitless kind of way of thinking, that little, you know, like hope that gets you out of bed, right? Like that little thing that tells you you can do it or everything's gonna be okay, right? Because if you don't think that way, what happens is you live in like scarcity, fear, and lack. You're gonna start thinking like, I gotta hold on to everything I can. I gotta hold on to this job. Otherwise, I might never get a job again. And that's not how she thought. She just thought, you know what? I'm gonna take each day as it comes. If it gets better, it gets better. If this is where I end up, this is where I end up. But I'm not gonna worry about what other people think they can do with me. I'm gonna worry about what I think I can do with me. And so she gets a new beginning. And these record labels did not want her. They thought of her as like kind of a pariah, you know, like they had to fight to keep her on there. Like they were just like, what, like who is this old lady that you're trying to keep on? Like they just did not want to have her. And again, she was unbothered. Her manager kind of fought for her. And the turning point comes when she goes to London. And I think it was important for her to go there. And it's important for a lot of people. Like you need to get out of your hometown sometimes, because whether or not you like it, you're conditioned to think in a certain way. Like you're thinking, this is my limit, this is what I can do, and these are my influences. And because you're not really exposed to other influences, like it's very hard for you to shape a self-image that is limitless, right? So she gets to London and it's like a breath of fresh air. And again, she didn't know what the world was, but this was it. And she gets to London and she's like, oh, other people have a different way of living. It's a different vibe. Nobody cares about your age here. Like it's just a different like energy. And so she gets What's Love Got to Do with It. And a few things I learned. First, I didn't know that she hated the song. Second, I thought that song was about Ike. I didn't realize it was a song that was pre-recorded. Like it was already kind of written. So yeah, not everything was about Ike. And so she's trying to make this song her own. And it was a weird pop song. Like if you listen to the original, like the demo that they showed her, you're like, this is awful. Like I don't want to listen to this. And so she kind of figured out a way to make it her own. And again, this has to do with experience, right? Like years of experience. If you put 110% into something, eventually, you know, you will be able to take anything and make the best out of it. Because if you're thinking like, I'm only going to do this, or I'm only going to do rock songs, or like you're not going to get anywhere. So she's just like, okay, this isn't ideal. This isn't really like what we talked about. Like I don't want to be a pop star. This is not what we agreed to, but this is the situation that I'm given and I'm not going to cry about it, and it is what it is. And so they finish the album and it's a hit, right? Like she gets a new kind of start, and she's able to, this album I think sold like 20 million plus records. And all of a sudden, not only does she have her old audience back, but she has this whole new audience. And this is both good and bad. So she's in movies, she's able to kind of make this money back and, you know, live her best life. But every interview she does, all people want to do is talk about Ike. Ike this, Ike that. What about Ike? How is Ike? How are you? How is like what's Ike up to? And she's like, I haven't seen Ike in so long. So by the time you get to this Private Dancer album, like, you're like, why are you asking about Ike? Because you see all this behind the scenes stuff that you don't see before. So then you're like, oh, he's such a footnote. Like, she's done, like, this isn't even the same person anymore. But again, the reporters don't know that. She says, okay, I'm going to write a book, and this book is going to end this forever. And the book had the opposite effect, right? Where it was supposed to end a conversation, it restarted a conversation. And then you have this movie, What's Love Got to Do with It? And this movie is it's like a cultural phenomenon. Like, if you've seen it, you know. If you haven't, I'm not sure where you've been. Like, you need to go watch it. But it is like the movie that solidified this part of our life as, you know, being a hallmark. And so now you have a bunch of new fans and new people coming to her music with this frame of mind, thinking like everything's about Ike. And so they're connecting with her in this way. And this is not really how she wanted to connect with people. Like, yes, this was an important part of her life, but this isn't the main storyline. You know, people were acting like this was the main storyline. And so again, she's kind of stuck in this, like, if I don't talk about it, people will talk about it. If I do talk about it, people, you know, there's nothing I can do to escape it. And she had an interview with, I think at the Cannes one of these film festivals, and they were asking her, have you seen the movie? And she goes, you know, no, I haven't seen this movie. Like, I don't want to relive this shit. Like, why do you keep asking me? And then you see kind of Angela Bassett sitting there like, oops, like, you know, she's just like, oh shit, like, did I do that? Like, and it's not really about the movie, but it's like, so much has happened since then, and rather than ask me about it, this is the thing that you're interested in, like this. And so it's frustrating. And she talks about her love life, and she says, you know, I've healed since then, but, you know, my love life has been shit, right? And she hasn't had one affair that she thought was productive or loving. And she said she would kind of like strip off her makeup and ask herself, who am I? Like, why can't anyone love me for me? What's wrong with these guys? Like, and it's frustrating, right? When you continuously see people for who they are and take the good, and some people are like that, right? Like, you take the good in someone and you outweigh the bad, even if there's more bad. And so it's just, she would ask, like, why is it that they can't see me for seeing them? And this was frustrating. And so I don't know who needed to hear this. I don't know who needs to hear this, but at one point she says, like, I want a man without shame. And once I've earned it, you know, like, I will receive it once I've earned it. And what I got out of that is, you know, sometimes we attract all kinds of different people, right? Good or bad. But once you're able to recognize the good ones and that you deserve them, then you've earned it. I think a lot of people get into toxic relationships because you think that this is what you deserve, or you have a poor self-image of yourself in terms of self-criticizing. Like, whereas you'll see other people and you'll outweigh the good with the bad. When it comes to yourself, you'll weigh out the good with the bad, but you'll place so much burden on all these things that you think are so horrible about yourself, and kind of minimize all these things that are really good about yourself. And so it's really interesting that, you know, then she met her husband, and this guy is so cute, and he was so understanding, and I liked his face. I don't know, like, such a wholesome young man. And she says, like, when he came to LA, she was like, you know what, you're gonna make love to me. And, you know, she's like, I'm single, I'm ready to mingle, I'm allowed to do whatever the hell I want. And that's the level of energy I want to come with. Like, I wouldn't be that confident to be like, hey. And, you know, he gave the energy back to her. You know, he wasn't like creeped out or opportunistic or weird about it. He's like, hell yeah, like, okay. You know, I think there's something very relaxing when you meet somebody on your same wavelength. Because sometimes we negotiate wavelengths, like, you'll try to get on somebody else's wavelength, but that wavelength it's not for you, okay? And then there's something like you can breathe when you've met someone, you're just on the same, like, they get it, you know, and you play off each other nicely, and there's no judgment, and you can just sit and accept each other in all your good and bad and whatever it is, like, without feeling like you have to modify or, you know, kind of adjust so this person can understand you. And so he understood her completely. He played it right back to her. So with that being said, you know, this documentary was about a lot of things. I think first and foremost, like, forgiveness. You really have to let it go sometimes. Like, the truth hurts, but you keep going. You know, people will hurt you, they will mess you up, but you can't be paralyzed and stuck in time. Not just for yourself, but even if that's how people want to see you. Like, you can't control how other people see you, but you can kind of take the narrative back. And it was also forgiving for the audience, because what it does is it says, okay, I know all of y'all have associated me with Ike, and I forgive you for that. Like, it's totally understandable why you think everything I've done is about Ike Turner. I get it. But here's a chance for me to really let you know what I'm up to and all the work that kind of went into getting to this point. And hopefully it's kind of an invitation to say, hey, like, maybe revisit my work and not think of Ike Turner every single time you do. And so it was forgiving for everyone, not just for the audience, but just for her own demons. And, you know, it's interesting. Like, I think they say the truth hurts, but we keep going. And watching this, I think it's inspiring for a lot of reasons, because you can always start over. You know, there's always a new beginning. And I think if you, again, tie your hopes to an age or to a moment or to something bad in your life, it's sad to say, but like the worst moments in your life can actually inspire somebody else. So as bad as it is, like, you have to keep moving. And if you're putting 110% into everything you do, something good will come out of it. And that's all you can do, right? Like, take things day by day, put 110%, don't give up, and kind of see where that road takes you. Because all of this is experience, right? Like, life is about experiences. And where, like, the end destination is about kind of the lessons you're able to get from it, good or bad. That's what I got out of it. You guys let me know what you think. Until next time.